Well, the Young Turks, Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian. It's exciting Monday. Exciting Monday. I'm jazzed. Some of you have talked about chipping in to buy me new jackets.
Really? Man.
Come on, this one's relatively new.
What do you mean? Why would they need to chip in? I thought we were corporate sellouts. Can't you buy your own jackets?
So referring to the blue jackets that I often wear on this show, I do have two of them though, to be fair to me.
The light blue?
No, the two dark blue ones.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, how's everything going for you, Casper?
Fine.
Good weekend?
I don't really think it's an exciting Monday, but
I agree to disagree. We'll get to why it's exciting in a second. But sure. Any woodworking over the weekend?
Yes.
I knew it.
We're gonna talk about woodworking in the post-game show.
How did I know?
No, I have videos. I have videos.
She has videos.
Yeah, and I'm going to discuss the merit of using automatic sanding tools versus manual sanding. It's a big debate.
It's a huge debate. Huge debate. We're trying to figure out what's going on. All right, so obviously we want to get the postgame, tyt.com/join. And yes, you can get it for a week free, tyt.com/trial. Okay, now we're gonna get to Biden in 1 sec. So and that's a wild and woolly story. I don't know what you think about it, Anna, yet. I'm curious to find out on air. That'll be fun. Later in the story, later in the show, I should say, some serious stories. Another unarmed African-American man shot, this time not by cops, and there is an arrest, but the story is pretty brutal. And then the Trump administration is now has a whistleblower saying, yeah, they gave security clearances to 25 people that should not have gotten them. So that's a fascinating story. That's a little bit later in the program as well. But with all that being said, Casper, let's get started.
All right. A former politician, or nominee, I should say, for lieutenant governor in Nevada has come out with an article detailing an experience that she had with Joe Biden back in 2014 during a campaign event. Her name is Lucy Flores, and she published the details of her encounter with Joe Biden in The Cut. And I'm gonna read you a few excerpts from it. She says, as I was taking deep breaths and preparing myself to make my case to the crowd, I felt two hands on my shoulders. I froze. Why is the Vice President of the United States touching me? She continues to write, I felt him get closer to me from behind. He leaned further in and inhaled my hair. I was mortified. I thought to myself, I didn't wash my hair today and the Vice President of the United States is smelling it. And also, what the actual F? Why is the Vice President of the United States smelling my hair? He proceeded to plant a big, slow kiss on the back of my head. My brain couldn't process what was happening. I was embarrassed. I was shocked. I was confused. I couldn't move and I couldn't say anything. I wanted nothing more than to get Biden away from me. My name was called and I was never happier to get on stage in front of an audience. Now, Biden was at the event in an effort to help get Democrats elected. Throughout the country, this is what members of the party usually do. And she was excited about it. She seemed to be a fan of Biden. And then after this encounter, she saw him in a completely different light. And I can understand why.
So lots of controversy surrounding this. A lot of people defending Joe Biden in a way that is not usual in a story like this. Whoopi Goldberg has jumped in, Mika Brzezinski, let alone the political figures and some of the women involved in previous close encounters with Joe Biden. I have about 7 things to say, and I'm not exaggerating. But first, I'd like to establish some set of facts. And I think that here we're going to be as unbiased as we can possibly be, because we are not on the right wing who revels in this type of stuff and throwing Democrats under a bus. We are not proponents of Joe Biden within the Democratic Party. And so I think we're gonna come at this from as objective a place as we can be. Obviously, we try to do that every day, but this is a good example of no one can say that we really have a dog in the fight in a sense, politically, right? So first of all, first conclusion is obvious. What Biden does and has been doing for a long time is weird. So can I get agreement on that?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that Biden is known for is being like the weird uncle, right? I've heard that way before these types of accusations came out, right? Like He doesn't really understand the importance of personal space. He'll get in women's personal space. And of course, there are pundits and everything who have commented on it. But I think that this was a long established characteristic of Biden's. Now, it's never been presented in any type of predatory way, but this is the first time that we've heard from a woman who is very clear in how uncomfortable she was from that encounter.
Yes, number two, I don't think that it necessarily means that it's sexual, though it could be. What's your take on that?
I don't know.
Yeah, so meaning not necessarily, but I wouldn't rule it out either. I mean, if it was just a random person, if it was Roy Moore within that context, I'd be like, yeah, it's probably sexual given his history. Now, no one, including now a couple of women that have come forward about Biden, have ever said that it was sexual. So there's not good evidence for that in this context, okay? But I grant that smelling a woman's hair could be, okay? So number three, this is very important. It doesn't mean that he has bad intent. Though I'm not sure, I'm sure that it matters. I'm not sure that it is dispository. So, dispositive, I should say. Anna, bad intent, yes or no? Have any idea?
I don't know. Here's what I do know. I know that no one has the right to put their hands on anyone. And if, remember, this encounter was not with two people who had known each other personally, who had interacted with one another face to face. This was literally the first time Lucy Flores came face to face with Joe Biden. And so I think about men in my life, in my professional environment, people who I work with on a regular basis touching me like that. And I'm gonna be clear, it is beyond unacceptable. But then when you think about someone in a giant position of power like Joe Biden doing that, after you met him for the first time, I mean, come on, he should know better. I don't know what his intent is. I don't know what's in his mind. I don't know what's in his heart. What I do know is that this type of physical contact is unacceptable.
Yeah, and so I think that it is possible that it's old school. That does not justify it at all. I'm gonna get to what that means in a second. And it's also, I think, possible that no one had the temerity to tell him, although it's fairly obvious. Now, a lot of people don't have the temerity to tell Donald Trump anything because he's so insecure. I don't know about Biden. So Lucy Flores says in her article, first time she came out with it, that she can't quite believe that no one said anything to him about it, especially because there have been articles written about it, et cetera. But people in power are almost never challenged. So I wouldn't be shocked if no one had a conversation with him about it. But at least the point number four, the main thing that you were saying, Anna, which is, could this make women uncomfortable? The overwhelming answer is obviously it could make them uncomfortable. Again, you said it already, but I'm just gonna go a little further. I mean, if anyone at work came up and put their hands on your shoulders, smelled your hair, and then kissed the back of your head.
I mean, they'd get punched in the face. Like, let's keep it real. And I think most of the men here know that. All of the men here know that. And so, but that's the thing. The men here just know better, right? So I'll give you an example. Every once in a while, I need help getting mic'd, right? I might wear a complicated dress or top, and so I can't do it on my own. And when the men here at TYT help me get mic'd, they're very cautious. They tell me what they're about to do. There's a lot of communication going on. And so there's no room for misinterpretation. There's no room for me to feel uncomfortable or wonder what the intentions are. And in this case, for anyone, much less Biden, to feel entitled to put his hands on a woman in this way and then plant a kiss on the back of her head, again, I'm gonna keep going back to the word unacceptable because that's what it is.
So I have a couple more points and we have a couple more cases about Biden that we're gonna get to. I just wanna say, look, I don't know that this is disqualifying. I don't know that it's my job to tell you whether it's disqualifying or not. Sometimes it is, we do a talk show. And so if something's really bad, we'll say, yeah, that's disqualifying. What Roy Moore did with kids when he was in his 30s, disqualifying, even though it was many years ago, et cetera, right? And so it is partly what we do for a living. I know it's a little absurd that that's what we do for a living, but in this case, I'm not positive that it's disqualifying, but And I give you that note of caution as like, I don't know that it's my place because is it my place to tell women what they are and are not uncomfortable with to the point where they would say, I don't want to vote for that guy under any circumstances? That's of course a decision that women voters and male voters have to make as they go in. But I don't think that, but it could be not disqualifying and something important to discuss anyway so that we stop this so-called tradition or culture that some older Americans are more used to, right? Maybe they genuinely think, hey, there's nothing wrong with it. I wouldn't be surprised by that they genuinely believe that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were, I don't know, they were into it, right? I wouldn't be surprised either way. But if they think there's nothing wrong with it, it's super important for people to have a discussion telling them, no, there is something wrong with it. Women are made uncomfortable by it. Don't do that. And so that alone justifies this conversation.
I think about societal expectations and how we are expected to conduct ourselves or business in public settings, right? And so does culture change? Of course. Are we expected to adapt and evolve along with our culture? Of course. And so why is it that average Americans are held to that high standard, but someone like Joe Biden, who is possibly going to run for the highest office in this country, not going to be held by that same standard, right? So our language has changed. Certain words that used to be acceptable are no longer acceptable. And again, we grow, we learn, we might make mistakes, but we readjust. You think Biden hasn't heard about the creepy uncle comments? You think he's completely unaware and in the dark about that stuff?
But there is some chance that he is, and I don't know that speaks well of him either. So let me give you more important context. So look, one point is what Anna makes, which is that this has been in the news for a long time. Lucy Flores made the same point. It shouldn't take Biden by surprise. On the other hand, as we've told you on this show for now over a decade, our personal experience with Biden, it's just two experiences that I had. Talked about it in the post games for the members, and I've talked about it on Old School and on this program. He is a close talker, whether you are male or female. And so you can go back and see us talking about it. It's not a matter of defending him, it's just a matter of reality, okay? So I remember back in 1988 when I ran into him at the Penn bookstore. He immediately comes up to me and starts talking to me super close. Back in 2004, they put together a get together in Washington, the Democrats did, for progressive talk show hosts. I run into Biden, we talk about Iraq. He doesn't know me at all. I'm sure he doesn't remember me from '88 when I was a student. And he's like this close to my face as he's explaining Iraq policy to me. So it is a peculiarity of Joe Biden. So it's not like when people say that, it's not a BS defense. That part is true.
No, I totally understand that. I think the close talking and the invasion of personal space in that way it might be uncomfortable, right? But it's different from someone placing his or her hands on you. And so in the case of Biden, it wasn't just the fact that he put his hands on her shoulders and leaned in close. He kissed the back of her head. Like, are we having a debate about what kissing means and what kissing, the connotation, right, behind kissing? Like kissing the back of a stranger's head at a professional event, at a political event, you have to know better than that.
So we're gonna show you some of the other women and what they said in a second. But remember, guys, Biden also did this with young girls on national television. So some will take that and say, aha. The counter argument to that is he's not so stupid that if he thought it was sexual, that he would do it on national television with underage girls. So, it's
at the same time though, and not to compare Biden to Trump, but Trump uses that strategy on a regular basis. Hey, I'm doing all these criminal things out in the open. I'm not trying to hide it, so I must not be doing anything wrong.
Well, that'll lead me to point 5 real quick, if that's the one we're on. No Republicans allowed to talk about this. Us Democrats and progressives can have real honest conversations about it. Republicans who are thrilled with Donald Trump, who brags about sexually assaulting women by grabbing their private parts because he's famous and he can get away with it, let alone 1,000 other horrific things he has said and done to women. You're not allowed to talk as if you care, because you don't care. And every action you've ever taken shows that you don't care. So please spare us your crocodile tears as you try to wade into this conversation, which you have no business in.
And one other thing I want to add to this is people need to consider how their actions and the way they interact with others makes them feel, right? How it makes the person that they're interacting with feel. And I don't think that Biden took a moment, regardless of what his intent was, regardless of whether or not this was meant to be sexual, I don't think he took a single moment to consider how his physical interaction with this woman would make her feel. And she actually writes about it in The Cut. She says, he was there to promote me as the right person for the lieutenant governor job. Instead, he made me feel uneasy, gross, and confused. The vice president of the United States of America had just touched me in an intimate way reserved for close friends, family, or romantic partners. And I felt powerless to do anything about it. So Biden didn't consider the power dynamic there. He didn't consider the fact that here's a woman who's running for a political position, who's about to give a speech at a rally, and he just, without really thinking about it, decided to engage in this physical way. So he needs to learn. I don't know if he's in this bubble with a bunch of people who just say yes to everything he wants, but regardless, we should expect better from people in positions of power. We should expect him to evolve along with the culture. It's not the 1950s. It's not the 1960s. We're now in 2019. At the time that this happened, it was 2014. And you should know better than to put your hands on someone like that in a professional setting without their consent.
So Anna, would it affect your decision to whether to vote for him or not? Now, let's keep it real. We're more progressive than Biden is. You're not likely to vote for him in the first place, and we're honest with our audience about such things. But would it, if you were predisposed, would this be something that makes you reconsider?
It really depends on how he reacts to it and whether he is apologetic and willing to learn or if he's being defiant, right? And so he did respond to this, and we'll get to it in just a second. But I thought about it not in the context of Biden, but I thought about it in the context of a politician whose policies I do support, and that's Bernie Sanders. And to be quite honest with you, had Bernie Sanders done the exact same thing to another young woman, I would have reservations about voting for him. I'm just being honest with you.
Yeah, well, of course, that's what we want. So, I don't know that I feel the same way, and maybe I have male privilege, right? So, to not just the Bernie Sanders, but I thought about it also with Elizabeth Warren. If Elizabeth Warren was known for kissing guys in the back of the head, which seems inconceivable, right? Would that then automatically disqualify her in my mind if all those men were made uncomfortable by it? And I'm not sure that it would. And I think that it is based on age and yes, a difference in culture. And so that doesn't excuse the actions, but I don't know, again, if that is dispositive, meaning that's the only thing I'm going to consider. Her work on regulating the banks is wonderful. And if there was a misunderstanding across the generations, I don't know that I would think that that was enough of an issue to stop me from voting for the person that I thought was the best qualified and the best person to be president. But this is super important, if I'm convinced that it was unintentional, that there was no bad intent.
Right, yeah, that is important. But at the same time, I think the difference in our perspective here really has to do with our ability to put ourselves in Lucy Flores' shoes. So as I was reading her account, I was thinking about how I would feel in this type of context if Joe Biden had done that to me, right? Because think about it, it's the vice president. That alone makes you nervous. He's one of the most powerful people in the country. And I don't like to be touched, period, right? And having someone who's a complete stranger in that position of power putting his hands on me and having this like sense of entitlement to put his hands on me like that would not only make me feel uncomfortable, I think I'd be pretty angry. So think about a woman in your life, right? Someone that you care deeply about and how you would react if the exact same thing happened to her, right? I think maybe that'll help you understand the perspective of women a little better. And I don't mean to speak for all women. I just think that people don't really understand, especially older individuals don't understand how seriously the younger generations take physical contact.
Yeah, well, now let me give you the perspective of men. And so now a lot of times in progressive circles, it's not a conversation that happens. But again, we're being honest here. And so Now a lot of guys are worried, can I do anything at all? So for example, one politician got in trouble because he put his hand on the shoulder or the hip of a woman as they were taking a picture together.
I mean, that.
Okay, so but you know what I'm saying though? Like, so it's not as clear cut as any side here is making it. So there's the aggrieved old school / right wing, but a lot of plenty of left wing.
I don't even think it's right wing. I think that that's just what the culture was like in like the 1950s.
Yeah, but I'm saying the current people who are, some portion of the right wing can't stand Biden and love this. Some portion of the right wing is like, come on, give the guy a break because of their natural inclinations, etc. Right? I'm saying that old school crew, whatever their political motivation is, thinks like, Jesus Christ, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know, can I touch, can I breathe, can I smile, can I not, etc. So I don't think it's right to dismiss them as, okay, they're all weirdos and they all know, but they're secretly trying to touch women, etc. No, I think they're genuinely confused, right? On the other hand, guys that are in that category, people that are in that category, understand that it is disconcerting for women if you come up and kiss them in the back of the head or smell their hair. That's weird. And it clearly, obviously violates their private space. And so, and look, different cultures have different ways of dealing with this. And if you're in China, by the way, there's a lot more personal contact on the streets, people bumping into each other as they move past you in the subways, the airplanes, etc. So every culture is slightly different, and our culture was slightly different. So it's okay to have these conversations and now say, maybe going forward, let's be super clear about where the boundaries are without, and this is up to you guys, but without being necessarily punitive for what happened in the old days. So it's annoying me that the Mika Brzezinskis of the world are like, what's the big deal? There's no big deal. Joe's awesome. I know Joe. Joe's awesome. By the way, would they say the same thing if it was Bernie Sanders?
I doubt it.
My guess is that they would not say the same thing, okay? But they all know and like Joe Biden, so they're like, it's no big deal at all. I don't think that's fair at all. And I think for other people saying, oh no, he's the worst of the worst and etc., I'm not sure that's fair either. And so let's try to find a reasonable ground here. I'm gonna say one more thing about Lucy Flores. Nearly every article is describing her as a Bernie Sanders supporter. So look, I can understand why that would be relevant. And if somebody accused Bernie Sanders of something and they were a huge Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke supporter, I could see how that would be relevant. But none of them mention that she left Our Revolution. She was on the board of Our Revolution, which was a group created by Bernie Sanders, and she left Our Revolution in what was, in not great terms. And so that's also important context. They make it seem like she's on Bernie's bandwagon and always has, and there appears to be a wink and a nod attached to that every time that it is written. And so, and by the way, in her original article, she said the reason she was afraid of coming out is because they're gonna ask, why now? It's exactly what people are asking. Why did it take you so long? I've heard it on television numerous times now. And was it, and blaming her for 1,000 different things. It's exactly what's happening right now.
Yeah, it's the reason why some women never even go public with these accusations, because they become victimized over again, especially in cases where there is clear sexual assault, where the intentions are obvious, right? In this case, they're not obvious, but I do think this is an important discussion because for those who are older and who haven't caught on to the fact that society has changed, it's time for you to catch on. It's time for you to adapt. You are not entitled to put your hands on anyone, period.
Okay, we're gonna take a quick break here, guys, but we did promise you guys the stories of the other women. We do wanna get to that when we return, and it's important context. We'll be right back. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you wanna get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. There's so many comments, obviously. I'll just keep it to the members. Kamala Harris is a cop, writes in, creepy old Uncle Joe treats women like he's living in the 1940s as chauvinistic and he would never touch a man in the same way, unacceptable. On the other hand, the liberal mom writes in, I'm from the Scranton area, I met him at a rally in 2008. He hugged me and whispered thank you in my ear. I never felt uncomfortable. Most of the older men in this area will greet both male and female in that way. She has every right to feel the way that she does, but I'm giving my viewpoint.
And so that's important.
Yes, very important. Diana 1020 says, what about the videos of him creeping on little girls? People have to have noticed those instances too. We've talked about those on the show prior to any of this. So it is obviously a phenomenon that people are aware of. Dolores, on the other hand, says, many people from his generation would kiss us on the forehead, but we're living in a no-touch time due to so many assaults on women. Don't do it, she says.
Jeez, a kiss on the forehead. Like, I have never had a man who I'm not intimate with kiss me on the forehead. Like, if a guy kissed me on the forehead who I'm not intimate with, he's not my partner, I would be insanely shocked. Anyway.
Right, but on the other hand,
Jake, it's a kiss on the freaking forehead.
No, hold on. I'm not saying that that's not bad. I wouldn't do it, and it's very unadvisable.
Like, we don't even hug.
No, I know. You and I, we try.
Like, we don't.
We try to stay very distant from each other. No, seriously though, although that is true. In Turkey, when I was 14, we went, and one of my friends who grew up in Turkey, I of course moved here when I was 8, started holding my hand and walking through the streets because that's what they did back in the day. And I was like, what? Okay, but I was like, okay, that's the culture here. So, but there is this giant cultural divide between Americans and based on age. I'm just saying, that's a fact. And then how we adjust, the fact that we have to adjust is a fact. And then everything else in the middle we have to talk about. Anyway, last one. I bathe in Devin Nunes' tears, writes in. Age is not an excuse for inappropriate behavior. If you plan on running for elected office, you need to be aware of how your own conduct affects other people in this current age. So a lot of great perspectives there. Thank you for sharing with us. And as I always tell you, we do the show together. We're all the Young Turks. And if you want to be one of our members and have your comments read more frequently, tyt.com/join. Okay, Anna, what's next?
A second woman has come out with her perspective and her story with Joe Biden. And she's alleging that Joe Biden also touched her in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. Her name is Amy Lapos, and she told the Hartford Courant that Biden grabbed her by the head and rubbed noses with her during a 2009 political fundraiser. Lapos said the alleged interaction occurred when she was volunteering at a fundraising luncheon for Representative Jim Himes, who she worked for as a congressional aide at the time. And finally, she says, quote, "It wasn't sexual, but he did grab me by my head. He put his hand around my neck and pulled me in to rub noses with him, or with me. When he was pulling me in, I thought he was going to kiss me on the mouth. Now he didn't, he just rubbed noses with her.
Yeah.
Creepy. Like, don't do that. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. That's all I have to say about it.
It is also amazing that it took the Me Too movement, it took a possible presidential run for someone to actually discuss this publicly. Because a lot of shows have made passing comments about Biden and his interactions with women. We made more than passing comments throughout. We said, why does he keep doing that? That's crazy. But there's this attitude that Lucy Flores correctly points out, that boys will be boys and Biden will be Biden. And I have to confess that I've been guilty of thinking Biden will be Biden. But no, you can't keep doing something wrong just because you've been doing it. And look, it reminds me, this is maybe a weird example, but of the story out of one of Malcolm Gladwell's books about why the South Korean airlines used to crash more often. It doesn't anymore, but it used to, and they couldn't figure out why. The engines worked, everything worked well, the training was great. The reason was because in the Korean culture, it was so wrong to correct an elder that the co-pilots would not correct the pilot, even if he was gonna run into a mountain. And they'd run into mountains, they'd crash the plane, everyone on board, including the co-pilot, the pilot, everyone would die. But the culture was so strong that they still wouldn't correct the pilot. And so that's how strong a culture can be. And so I understand that there was this culture where men got to do this to women and it was no big deal. Hey, I'm calling you honey, I'm calling you sweetie. A lot of people still do that. And a lot of people think there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Or touching the shoulders, touching the hair, smelling the hair, that's weird, that's
Super
really weird. Okay, but there's a range, and there's this cultural divide. And so this is a great opportunity, whether you're going to judge Biden for it or not, to at least have that conversation so you tell the older generation, hey, the culture has changed and that's not acceptable anymore.
Now, Joe Biden did respond to what Lucy Flores shared in her piece in The Cut, and he has not apologized for it. But what you're about to hear is a part of his statement and Lucy Flores's reaction. Take a look.
Vice President Biden and his team just released a statement just moments ago from Mr. Biden. Here's what it says, quote, "In my many years on the campaign trail and in public life, I have offered countless handshakes, hugs, expressions of affection, support, and comfort. And not once, never did I believe I acted inappropriately. If it is suggested I did so, I will listen respectfully, but it was never my intention. We have arrived at an important time when women feel they can and should relate their experiences and men should pay attention, and I will," unquote. What's your response?
Well, I certainly think that it's better than his first statement that they released on Saturday. I'm glad that he's willing to listen. I'm glad that he is clarifying his intentions. Frankly, my point was never about his intentions, and they shouldn't be about his intentions. It should be about the women on the receiving end of that behavior. And this isn't the first time, and it wasn't the only incident where he was acting inappropriately with women. If he is saying that he never believed that that was inappropriate, then frankly, I think that's a little bit of a disconnect and not being aware, a very sense of not being aware, because there has been documentation, both in photos, videos, stories that were written. Now, that being said, I think that part of the reason why I decided to finally say something is because those behaviors were not being taken very seriously. They were not being considered from the perspective of the woman on the other side of that power dynamic.
So I want to add a little more to what Flores said. Look, Joe Biden was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee during the Anita Hill hearings. And lately, he's been apologizing for the way that those hearings were conducted. He's apologizing for the way that Professor Hill was treated during those hearings. And so I fail to understand how he could look back at the treatment of Anita Hill back then and understand the prevalence and the impact of harassment, and somehow still not understand how some women would not want to be touched without consent, whether it's rubbing noses or a kiss on the back of the head in a professional setting. Like, how is it that he didn't realize, oh, maybe the way that I behave around other women could make them uncomfortable, and maybe I should really rethink this. One other thing I want to note is, look, I'm really tired of people trying to coddle presidential candidates. I know he hasn't announced yet, but he is possibly gonna run for president of the United States. And I would argue that the president of the United States should be in tune with what the culture is in the country and what is and is not acceptable behavior around men and women, right? What is and is not considered going too far when it comes to physical contact. If we're gonna keep making excuses for someone who's gonna run for president of the United States, well then, we get what we deserve, right? We get a president who doesn't actually understand what our culture is and how much it's evolved since the 1960s.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just gonna keep emphasizing this one point. And the allegation that came from Amy Lapos today that Anna read you a little while ago, she went on to say there's absolutely a line of decency. There's a line of respect. Crossing that line is not grandfatherly, it's not cultural, it's not affection, it's sexism or misogyny. And the caveat that I would put to that, or my, not caveat, but my interpretation of that is, I just wanted everyone to acknowledge that maybe it's both, that it is cultural and it's also sexist and misogynistic. So that maybe our culture growing up in a time when men were in charge and didn't have to care about women's feelings and didn't have to worry about if it crossed the line if you kissed a woman in the back of her head or smelled her hair. So the only thing I'm pushing back on is that it's not cultural, because I can see it with my own eyes. And you guys wrote in while we've been doing the show live. Yes, for older generations, it's definitely cultural. But that doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that we should continue it. It's like, when in the South they say, hey man, we're proud of our heritage. And slavery was part of our heritage. Well, we shouldn't be proud of that. And so some parts of your heritage were terrible. And it's okay to say, hey, I'm glad we got past that and we changed that part of our heritage. So I think saying that it's not cultural makes it seem like Biden is the only one on the planet who's ever done it. And I don't think that's necessarily fair to him. And some of you might not care to be fair to him, but I don't think it's right. I don't think it's correct. On the other hand, saying that it's cultural doesn't mean that you could say, oh, so what? He's gonna keep on doing it and it's no big deal and anyone gets to do it because it was part of our culture. No, this is the time to draw the line.
By the way, we have a plethora of old white men running around in Congress. So are there a ton of stories of current members of Congress behaving in this way? And do we make excuses for them by saying, oh, it's just a cultural disconnect? I don't know, maybe there are other men who do the same thing and we just don't hear about it. But I would argue that he's not the only older man in politics right now. So anyway, that's another point. I do want to get to another component of the story that is important, and that has to do with a photo that has been going viral again. So, Stephanie Carter is former Defense Secretary Ash Carter's wife. And when Ash Carter was being sworn in as Defense Secretary during the Obama administration, there was a photo featuring Stephanie Carter and Joe Biden that went viral. Now, it's going viral again, especially considering the piece that Stephanie Flores wrote in The Cut, where she talks about an uncomfortable physical interaction she had with Biden. And so this is a favorite for the right wing. They love to share this image and make it appear that Joe Biden is some sort of, sexual predator. But I do think it's important to share the perspective of Stephanie Carter, and she did come public or go public with her reaction to this. So here's what she writes. By the time then Vice President Biden had arrived, he could sense I was uncharacteristically nervous and quickly gave me a hug. After the swearing in, as Ash was giving remarks, he leaned in to tell me thank you for letting him do this and kept his hands on my shoulders as a means of offering his support. But a still shot taken from a video, misleadingly extracted from what was a longer moment between close friends, sent out in a snarky tweet, came to be the lasting image of that day. I thought it would all blow over if I didn't dignify it with a response, but clearly that was wishful thinking. I won't pretend that this will be the last of that picture, but it will be the last of other people speaking for me. So she's arguing that this photo, which might make it appear that I was uncomfortable, is not giving people my views, my real views. And my real view is, no, there was nothing wrong with that. He didn't do anything that made me uncomfortable.
Look, so I'm split on this one too. Of course I believe her, and that was the day that her husband was being sworn in as defense secretary, and it turns out they've been friends with the Bidens for a long time, and she slipped on the ice or whatever, so she was actually uncomfortable, and Biden did soothe her, and since they've been friends a long time, there was nothing untoward, etc. I believe every part of that.
The word soothe is uncomfortable.
Yes, I hear you on that too. But did she look a little uncomfortable as Joe Biden, is inside her hair? His nose is at least has, lodged itself in her hair. Of course she was uncomfortable, come on. And look, if this was the only picture and the only time, I'd say, hey, people are exaggerating. She says there was nothing wrong with it, let's move on. And our original co-host, Pat Mankiewicz, says, pictures don't tell 1,000 words, they lie. And so it's just a moment in time. On the other hand, we have seen and we have shown on this show countless times that Joe Biden has done that to different women and girls. So it's not like it doesn't happen. It definitely happens. And that's why Lucy Flores and Lapos and some others are now coming forward and saying, hey, you know what? We were uncomfortable with it. He shouldn't do that anymore at a bare minimum. So Stephanie Carter, to be fair to her, was not uncomfortable with it. And so you shouldn't speak on her behalf because she had no problems with it at all.
And that's an important thing to remember, because with the Me Too movement, we've all seen people exploit that movement in order to put words in the mouths of other women, in order to make a big deal out of a situation that the woman in question didn't have an issue with. I think that that's the wrong way to go about it as well. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't take someone like Stephanie Flores seriously, because what she's bringing up—
Lucy Flores.
I'm sorry, Lucy Flores. We shouldn't take that seriously because what she has to say is relevant. It's important. And regardless of what Biden's intentions were there, she was uncomfortable with that physical contact, and he should be aware of it and not make excuses about how there's some sort of cultural divide or disconnect.
Yeah, last thing on this is now they're asking all the presidential candidates, and Klobuchar said, I have no reason not to believe Lucy Flores. Does anyone not believe Lucy Flores? Yeah, everybody believes her, right? Be kind of weird not to believe her. The question is whether you think that that's disqualifying, a big deal, a small deal, a mid-sized deal. That's the question at hand. And so now all of the candidates are having to say that they believe her. Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro. I don't know. It's a pet peeve of mine. Stop asking them that. It puts them in an unwinnable situation. It's not fair to those candidates. I got no love for Klobuchar, as you know, in terms of ideology. I'm not on her side of the Democratic Party. But what do you, I mean, is she supposed to say Biden is guilty? She's supposed to say Biden's not guilty? What is she supposed to say? So it just puts all the other candidates in a weird spot, and it's not for them to necessarily judge. And if somebody wants to jump out and quote unquote take advantage of it, that would be a different situation, right? But if you're asking the candidates and getting in their grill, and then now, of course, the new parlor game is we're gonna judge every word of every other candidate about what they said about this potential candidate. Okay, that part you should let go. Let's focus on what the real issue is, which is drawing a line and saying that this stuff is not acceptable anymore. Even if you thought it was in the past, a lot of people don't think it was acceptable in the past, but even if you believe that, you gotta stop it now.
When we come back from the break, we're gonna switch gears and talk about a deposition that was made public featuring Alex Jones.